Oh, it's time for Dave's Big Dictionary. This has to do with finding a word, randomly in the, I'm in the sillies portion of the show now. I've been talking nonstop for 2 hours and 45 minutes. This is when the silly part comes out that I can't help because I'm just like overtired and sick and like I'm just going to be nuts. Earlier in the program, Pooey randomly helped me find a word in this Merriam-Webster dictionary to talk about. It was just not pre-planned. It was completely at random over thousands and thousands. There are 75,000 definitions in this book. So there's a 1 in 75,000 shot at finding a word. And the last time we did this, we randomly landed, and this is absolutely true, on the word enema. And I did this whole discourse on how important that word was in my life, even though I've never had one. And it was the perfect word. This time, I was like, oh, God. Oh, boy. I don't even know what the hell to talk about. But then something came to mind. So, ladies and gentlemen, on this episode of Dave's Gone By, this iteration of Dave's Big Dictionary, we'll be talking about dry dock. Extra, tell all about it. It's Dave's Big Dictionary. Dave's Big Dictionary. So here's the word dry dock. And I actually want to find it maybe more of an online dictionary here. Let's see what they have to say, because there's not that much of a definition in the actual book. So, a dock that can be kept dry during the construction or repair of ships. Let's see if there's anything. I don't really have a lot about it. First known use was in 1854, right, in the meaning defined above, as a verb, so it can dry dock something. And then, but the noun goes back to 1626. Here we go. Oh, I kind of scroll up to find the whole thing. The ship is in dry dock, which feels almost more like an adjective, doesn't it? What else? Or you can place something in a dry dock. The yacht is believed to be dry docked at a Metro Detroit marina. Okay. So they have these, not really about it, unfortunately. So not the easiest word for me to talk about, because I don't really know anything maritimal. And don't know about ships and stern and port and bow and bosun and these words. You know, I read books about the sea and I still wouldn't know what half the terminology meant. But I do remember growing up that there was, and I'm going to look this up, Dry Dock Savings Bank. Does that ring a bell? Dry Dock Savings Bank was a bank, this is according to Wiki, that operated in New York City from 1983 until it suffered from bank failure only 9 years later in 1992. And yet I remember it very well. It was a merger of Dollar Savings Bank, which I vaguely remember, and and Dry Dock Savings Bank, which both dated back to the 1800s. So there was a dry dock way, way before then. That makes sense. Dry Dock had 30 branches at that point, okay? They were sold to Manny Hanny. Remember Manufacturers Hanover? That's the thing. What happened to all these banks when I was growing up? You know, because the 80s were this era of conglomerates and mergers and Larry the Liquidator and things being brought up. And it's nostalgic in a weird way to remember all these things. There's like Bank Leumi. Anybody remember that one? We used to have a Bank Leumi when I was growing up, and we liked it because it seemed to be sort of pro-Israel or was founded by Israelis, or what the hell is the deal with Bank Leumi? What was Bank Leumi? It's kind of unfair to keep Googling for things. Actually, Bank Leumi is an Israeli bank. We just lost the branch that I grew up with, but it's still there. But all these banks that were happening, there was Anchor. My first job out of school, out of college, was, I was casting about for work. I was either both too lazy and also too proud to go looking for shitty crew work on other people's movies and stuff, of getting up and doing that kind of physical labor rather than making movies of my own. So I got a day job working in mortgage originations at a bank in Rockville Center. It was called Anchor Savings Bank. It was every year's. God, how do banks fail? And I don't mean just in these giant crises when JP Morgan is threatened or they have big, terrible scandals. How is it that banks that should know what to do with money, they basically got a bunch of people putting money in, and then banks should know how to invest, and then you keep rolling. But banks did this for decades. And we're there, and they were part of the neighborhood. They were part of the fabric of where you were. And then suddenly, over the past 20 years, it's like, well, no, this bank is no longer. Oh, this was bought up by this bank for 3 years, and then another bank bought them up, and then this one out of business, but it was taken. It's like, what the hell? And it makes everything so complicated and so ridiculous. And yet, at the same time, there is something to be said for this giant corporatization and globalization of banks, because we've been dealing, and I will not get into specifics, but we've been dealing with a bank near where my wife's parents have lived called Ridgewood Savings Bank. And there's a lot of Ridgewood banks in that area, but not elsewhere in the country. You can do stuff with them online, but it's this giant, old, beautiful building that's in the middle of Queens there. And we've just been trying to deal with these folks with paperwork and bureaucracy and physically having to go to the bank and sign papers and do this and that, which with any other bank or one of these giant monoliths like Citibank or Chase Bank, or now a TD Bank seems to be everywhere, where you just go, and it doesn't matter, you go to a branch, any fucking branch, just go in when they're open. But this one is like, nope, you got to come in, you got to schlep him, you got to do that. And it's like, Jesus, why? Because they're old school. And I do sort of get that. I do kind of miss that of when this branch was opened, and it was a close branch to where my in-laws lived. What they would do, they would go, they would physically walk over, it's a couple of blocks, do their banking. They had a passbook. I had a passbook. My first bank out of when I was in junior high school, I had a little passbook, and it was exciting to me. I would go into the bank, and I put a little money in, like I was making $2 an hour working at my local library. Literally, like $2.50 an hour, tops. And I would go in and save some money, and then I would see. Because back then you would get something like 8% or 12% interest. And I'd get like 30 cents just by leaving my money alone. And I'd add a dollar or two or $5 to my passbook. They'd run it through, they'd stamp it. And I'd look at it and I was like, look at that. I deposited this and I made this interest. And it was really kind of exciting to me. It was kind of made me proud that I was saving this ridiculously negligible amount of money. But being mature and putting money away and having my own money, most of which was, birthday money and bar mitzvah money or whatever it was. But still. So I get that. I get that old school idea of, well, it was fine. You had to go, and they didn't have cash machines, and they didn't have this and that. Now this bank is still there. It's got a friggin' coffee machine where you can literally have Starbucks coffee, which is why homeless people go into the bank. You go in there and you're like, who are these people who are here banking? And it's basically they're, probably living on the street, but they know they can go into the bank, go to the machine, and get a free cup of Starbucks coffee with milk. And come and chai. The machine makes chai, which is disgusting in the best of circumstances, but it makes this unbearably sweet, gooey chai tea for free in the bank. I'd rather have 1% higher interest on my money in a bank than have them spend it on a free cup of coffee when I'm there, but okay, it's fine. But it's still one of these really old school, banks, and you walk in there and you see what it must have been 60 years ago, and they have a mural, and it really looks like old Philadelphia and Maryland and New York architecture, like the J.P. Morgan sort of library building things. It's really beautiful and impressive if they don't ruin it. So I get it. But it's just unbelievable that my wife and I, or sometimes just she, have to schlep back into Queens to physically be there at this bank rather than, driving over a quarter mile to a Chase outfit, a TD outfit, to do what we got to do. But it makes me nostalgic for these banks that were there and did their thing and then just suddenly, boom, they're gone. Like my mom. My mom does her banking. She was doing banking for years at this Lynbrook branch, and then they were brought out and became Washington Mutual, but now they're not Washington Mutual anymore. It's like, it's too much. You start to understand why people in their 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s are like, they don't want to program VCRs. It was easier to watch a TV. Or they don't want to figure out how to do this because it's too much. They're going to have to change all their passwords and this and move their account from this to this, or suddenly, if you have this stock, you have to sign this and change because this is now being sold to this, and your mortgage, it used to be handled by these people, but remember, the mortgage payments you're making, we're no longer handling them. It's like so much every month, every half a year, that happens to us just by the natural course of events where everything changes so fast all the time in the world that we live in. And we're forced to keep up. We're all on the hamster wheel of updating our passwords, changing our accounts, canceling this, renewing that, figuring out, making sure that we don't leave this, that we're not being charged for this and that we're not getting fees for this. It's just so much. And that is, for no particular reason, that is what sparked in my mind when I see Dry Dock. Because I never had money in Dry Dock Savings Bank. But I hear that name, and it's like, oh, it's kind of like there used to be a bank, I think there used to be a bank called the Bowery in New York. Am I wrong about this? Bowery Savings Bank. I just remembered that one. And look, you go to the wiki page, it's beautiful. The Bowery Savings Bank was in New York City, chartered in 1834. By 1980, it had 35 branches in the New York metropolitan area. It was sold in 1992 for only $200 million to Amundsen Company, and now what? Now, it was a Stanford White building, right? Where is it now? Timeline. Converted to Federal Home Savings of America, Bowery Division of Federal Savings Bank. Not this. It pays to save at the Bowery. Not it pays to save at the Federal. The Loan Commission. No. Sorry. Not everything new is an improvement. And I know I sound like an old fogey. I am an old fogey. I'm 61 and I have a head cold. I'm this much closer to my casket, for fuck's sake. So, still, Dry Dock, which is the word of the day on Dave's Big Dictionary.